Daniel, thank you so much for having me today.
You're welcome.
This has been a great meeting, and you were very kind to be willing to answer a question at the end of it. I was thinking this morning about how to set this up, and there's an investor that we know who has run private equity firms, but he's also on the investment committee of a large endowment now. So he sits on both sides of things. And he has a very funny thing that he says, which is, I'll often sit on at the AGM for one of our funds, and they'll present to me how things are going. And then at the end of it, I've looked at all the materials and I ask them, all right, thank you for everything that you shared. The performance in this fund looks great. Do you believe in the fair market value of where you're currently marking the portfolio? Everybody nods their heads. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, sell everything tomorrow. You know where I'm getting at, right? Because in his view, having been a fund manager and now on the other side of it, I'd say he believes he has insights into the business and understanding, obviously we're investing in private markets, illiquid companies in many cases. And oftentimes the marks may not be fully reflective of the value in both directions. And we've seen this for ourselves. There's companies right now that we hold at cost because there hasn't been a qualified financing in, a year, but the growth has been tremendous in the business. And I'd say similarly, we have companies that maybe have taken on Series B investment capital that are being held at marks that are likely a bit rich for the business. And I think that there's examples of those companies being held up. DPI is a metric that everybody understands, like how much capital has come back to me on the dollar that I invested. And then there's other metrics like TVPI, which tries to give you a sense of how things are doing, but at the end of the day, like it's only worth what the next person's willing to pay for it. You work with lots and lots of funds. Let's take TVPI. How do you know if your fund managers are actually doing a good job? Is that a useful metric?
Okay, that's a very, very good question that I am currently facing, because I need also to explain to our own LP, because we do manage a fund of fund, what the TVPI of a fund of fund means. And this, of course, leads us to the TVPI or the NAV of the underlying fund. Of course, we are focusing on VC funds, early stage VC funds, because the answer that I'm going to provide will be a bit different for private equity or even growth equity. So regarding venture capital, very clearly, the TVPI doesn't really reflect the potential of the fund. That's something I'm strongly convinced about. Why? Because most of the VC funds manager, and this is especially true in the US, actually within our current portfolio, there is only a couple of exceptions. Especially I am thinking about a European fund, which does every quarter really deep valuation of each portfolio company using comparable, as long as those companies have, of course, some financial metrics, revenues, maybe some profitability at some point in time. So we might apply using comparable a set of valuation techniques to get close to the reality. But this is an exception. So let's come back to the majority of situation. And again, here in the US, I would say most, not to say all, of the funds manager refer to the last round of funding. That means that if at some point in time a company reaches profitability and there is no need for new capital, then the value is clearly not the reality of the value of this company. And that's the reason why we do see a TVPI around 1 plus something or minus something, because the reference is still the last round executed by the company. It means that you don't have the upside potential, but in some cases, and I'm thinking about one case like that, it also means that if the fund manager took in a boom of the industry where valuation were pretty much high, too high, if this manager doesn't take into into consideration the underperformance of the company by marking down the valuation, the value is not even relevant. So I have one case in mind.
Okay.
It's common. So what does it mean for us as a LP into VC funds? It means that we need to have our own assessment of a potential value. How do we do that? Simply by getting an assessment of the value of each company of the fund and how that value, the current value in the books, reflect the financial metrics of the company. To put it another way, because it was not that clear, we need to reconcile the real metrics, financial metrics of the company with the current valuation. If there is a discrepancy, then we can do our own estimation. Of course, it's not the truth, but it gives a better view of the potential of the fund, not the TVPI. Of course, TVPI is going to be relevant when there will be less and less assets into the fund. But very early on in the life cycle of a fund is not relevant.
If I could just maybe as a follow-up, because as a fund manager, I'm trying to understand this as best as I can, because obviously we want to be sharing what we believe to be the value as best as we can. We have a company that does 5 million in run rate revenue. And I think that the market would typically assume, call it a 10 to 12x multiple on that business. But we haven't marked it there. And a buyer has come along and offered them close to 22x multiple on the business. How am I supposed to account for that? Because I want to be as honest as I can and true and, kind of preserve our trust. I never would have marked that company at 22x multiple because you'd say you're crazy. And then somebody comes along and says, we're willing to do that. Like, how is a fund manager supposed to think about, here's a business that 5 million run rate, apply a 10 to 12x multiple. We were holding it at less, and all of a sudden somebody comes along and offers 22x.
There's really a question that VC funds managers are asking themselves, because in the PE industry, at least in Europe, for what I know, every single PE fund manager applies the IPEV, International Private Equity Valuation Rules. This is in force in any single European fund, including VC. Even if VC do not yet use those IPEV guidelines fully, to be clear. Now, if you want really to provide as a VC fund manager a fair value, you have to do things like what you just described. That's to say, again, as long as the company is no longer at the seed stage, has already some financial metrics, then what you have to do is to take a set of comparables, do some estimate of what are the average ratio that are relevant for those companies, and apply it to your own company. If you want to be cautious, you still have the ability to apply a discount to the valuation you have got to make sure you have a margin compared to the simple application of the rough multiple. Because you never know, of course, until it's realized. But if you want to provide, let's say, true fair value, that's what you should do.
And if a firm does that internally versus through a third party, which one would you say, without knowing a whole lot of detail, would you prefer? Third party kind of analysis or internal?
I would say third party is more related to regulation, compliance. For example, in Europe, we have AIFMD, whereby the evaluation should be conducted by someone independent from the investment team. Be it internal, done by the CFO, or external, done by a third party. My view, a business view, is that as long as we trust the management team, and the manager is able to display how we get to that value, that's okay. That's okay. And we have one, as I said at the beginning, one European-based VC fund, basically investing in seed Series A. They do every single quarter the exercise. And they provide the set of comparables that they have used, the multiples that they have retained, and how they apply it to the company.
Yeah.
That's enough. That's enough.
The reason I asked that question about third party is because a lot of our companies will use a platform like Carta to do 409A valuations for stock option pricing. And every once in a while I'll go, and spend a lot of time looking at what the comparables are that they offer. And like they're comparing them to large public equities that, I don't know, are sports software, but they're not at all relevant to like our business. And it's helpful to hear that you think, that an internal evidence base, like I understand the logic, is probably actually more compelling at an early stage than having some third party, which I think most people would say, oh, a third party should be better.
Yes, and then we reinforce that by a key example that I faced last year. One of our portfolio funds investing in biotech had a challenge with the third-party evaluator. Because this third party saw that the biotech companies in the portfolio didn't add any single dollar of revenue. So we wanted to discount the valuation, and in biotech, it doesn't make any sense. So it means that you have to be careful about the type of independent evaluator you are going to pick, because you have to make sure that you really understand the business you are in, or the companies that you have in your portfolio are in.
Makes sense. Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it.
You are welcome.